Okay, well, hello. Let me get myself situated here. Thanks for calling in. As you know, the 4th of July weekend was extra in terms of crime, particularly violent crime. I want to point out that Cleveland is not unique in this regard, that it seems to be a trend, in my understanding, that beginning around February of this year, there has been an uptick in crime in general, and particularly violent crime with guns. And the weekend was not unique just for the city of Cleveland, that the same phenomena was happening in general throughout the country. But that being said, the police have the responsibility of doing whatever they can do in order to ensure the safety of our neighborhoods, our communities, and individuals who live in those communities. And also recognizing that the police are not the solution, because again, crime is a symptom of some underlying things that are going on that is really the topic of debate that is occurring throughout America today, and people recognizing and coming to the realization that just like racism is a public health issue, so is those things that produce crime and violence are public health issues, and we need to address it that way. But right now, we have to ensure the public that what has happened over the last 6 months or so, Cleveland, and what is happening in particular over this last holiday weekend is something that we're on top of, and people have to know that not only are we on top of it, they have to have the confidence that we're doing something about it. So that's the purpose of this press conference. So I'll introduce Mr. Howard, Director Howard of Public Safety, who will then introduce the Chief of Police, Chief Williams, when he's completed.
Thank you, Mayor, citizens of Cleveland. It's very important to understand that, for me to reiterate what the mayor just said, that the violence, even the fireworks that happened in the city of Cleveland, is not unique to the city. It happened around the country. The violence that we saw is not just a matter of police. When police officers receive these calls to respond to crimes of violence, emergency medical services also respond. We had dozens of shootings. We had four homicides. We had structural fires that occupied the fire department. And even out to those calls, emergency medical services respond. Public safety works in conjunction with each other as a team when they're out there answering the call for help from the citizens of Cleveland. When these calls come in, this is on top of the investigative work that is already being done to solve crimes that have happened prior to. When these calls come in, they lead to more work from our law enforcement and fire officials to investigate those crimes to which they were called in. So the window of time that public safety receives these calls, it's not just within that window. There's work that goes on before and there's work that goes on after. And our police officers, our firefighters, and our EMS workers, even our animal control, are out working to make sure that Cleveland is a safer place. And public safety is not the answer. Public safety is called in response to things that have already happened. There are other underlying issues, as the mayor brought up, that need to be addressed within our community as a whole and around the country. These are things that are constantly being looked at, constantly being debated, and we have law enforcement, fire, and EMS constantly working to make Cleveland a safe place for citizens and visitors. With that, I'll introduce Calvin Williams, Chief of Police, who will provide you some detail.
Thanks, Director Mayor. I don't mean to be redundant, but as the mayor and the safety director stated, the things that have happened in Cleveland over this past weekend are kind of synonymous with things that are happening around the country. Since the latter part of February going into March, when COVID-19 really started to hit in this country, when there were stay-at-home orders issued, when businesses started to have a lot of folks work from home, we saw an increase in violent crime. And again, not just here in the city of Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, but across the country. And we've been dealing with those increases ever since. This past weekend was particularly violent, and we kind of see these surges during holiday weekends here in the city and across the country. We had over 27 felonious assault shootings. Folks were shot or stabbed, and 4 homicides, as the director stated. A lot of those incidents, we have some good leads. There were quite a few that were, I'd say, familial things that went on, people that knew each other, that got into disagreements that resulted in the violence. Those with the cooperation of the victims and witnesses around are a lot easier to solve and bring conclusion to. But we also had things that happened that we don't have that type of information. We don't know why the person was a victim of violence, so we're trying to get to the bottom of those. If you have information out there on any of the things that happened this weekend as far as violent crime, homicide, you can call our homicide unit at 623-5464, or any other violence that happened in the city. You can call Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous, and that number is 25-CRIME, that's 25-CRIME, and your tip will be anonymous, and usually there's a reward for the Crime Stoppers tips. The other thing the director brought up was fireworks. We responded to almost 700 calls for fireworks the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that's dramatically increased over last year. And again, that phenomenon wasn't unique to Cleveland. I've talked to a lot of folks around the country, and I'm sure the folks out there here in Northeast Ohio have watched the news and they've seen the same things that have happened around the country. Out of those, there are a lot of different responses from the Division of Police as well as Fire and EMS, either for injuries or, like the director stated, structural fires, some related to fireworks, some not. But again, our community has to be vigilant. You have to see something, say something. You have to assist us in making sure that we stay safe. The mayor and the director also talked about the investigative side of this. There are a few things that are coming up here in the city of Cleveland in the next 30 to 60 days that are going to immensely increase our ability to not only respond to violent crime, but to investigate and also mitigate violent crime as we go forward with the rest of the summer. And we'll be talking about some of those things as we get closer to the implementation date of those. But the message here is that, you know, these things that happen here in the city aren't unique to us. The things that happen in the city aren't just crime related. There are societal ills and foundational things that lead to these, and we have to all be involved in the solution of how we mitigate and suppress violent crime in the city and how we make the lives of the people who visit, work, and live in this city a lot better. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief Director. Questions?
So now we will move into the Q&A portion of this press conference. Here are a few things you should know before we get started. First, you will need to dial 10 to be entered into the Q&A queue. Then the system will let you know when you've been unmuted to ask your question. Please be sure to proceed your question with your name and media outlet. Now please stand by while we move into the Q&A portion.
To place your conference is now in question and answer mode. To summon each question, press 1, then 0. Each question will be asked in the order it was received. You have 3 questions remaining. Good afternoon, it's Tracy Karrie from Channel 5. Quick question, Mayor. You signed an order Friday night requiring masks in the city.
Yes. Well, can we, I know that's different than what we're talking about right now, and I will gladly talk to you about that. So I'll do it briefly so that we can stay on topic. The Director of Safety and the Director of Health have set up a protocol between themselves as to how they will enforce that direction, not only in terms of masks, but also in terms of enterprises such as bars or restaurants or nightclubs who are not following the direction of the order. And today at 2 o'clock, the governor will be making some announcements, and I'm pretty sure that in his announcements, he will also be addressing some of the same issue around whether or not people should be wearing masks or not. When he does that, that will help us to combine whatever he's talking about with whatever it is, the orders that we have issued, and then that will give us a better sense of how do we enforce that. As you know, we're introducing legislation to council as to what are the penalties associated with if you do not have a mask on. And so we're going to look at whatever the governor and the state announces, whether it's a civil penalty or criminal charge associated with that, and we'll blend all these things together. But our intent is to enforce whatever it is that we have talked about, to have the proper use of discretion by the people on the ground who are responsible for the enforcement, and that we will do it in a way that makes sense in doing it. And now, again, that is brief, and if you look at the order, you'll see that the order is pretty prescriptive in terms of what is required.
You have 3 questions remaining.
Hi, this is Peggy Gallup with Fox 8, and I have a question for the chief. Chief, do you know how many people have been arrested? I know it's this Tuesday, but how many people have been arrested from this past weekend's violence? I know we did have that one homicide arrest.
Chief.
No, Peggy, I don't have an exact number on the arrest from this weekend. We can definitely get you that information, though.
Okay, and once again, and I know you said this earlier, but it's so important for people to call the detectives, call Crime Stoppers if they have any information, because you need that so you can make sure that, correct?
Yeah, people call Crime Stoppers. It's anonymous, and again, that number is 25 crime. But if people, don't want to be involved in the Crime Stopper system, you can call the district operations in which you're a resident of, or if it's a homicide, you can call our homicide unit. That's 623-5464 number.
Okay, thank you.
You have 2 questions remaining.
This is Adam Breeze with Cleveland.com. 2 questions. One, wanted to give Chief Williams a chance to respond to the sheriff's statements about that no one had breached the justice center during the May 30th riot and protest. And 2, to ask about the SIU's response to the Polonian assault shootings over the weekend. How many did SIU get to, if any, and what were some of the issues there?
Well, let me first start off before I let the chief address it, that in the article that was written in Clean.com, so that you know, the chief is not a liar. The chief is not a liar, and I'll repeat that again, he's not a liar. And so the chief can talk to you about what he has done to ferret out facts and when he intends to release those facts as part of his debriefing that he did about the whole situation. But I want to emphasize to you, contrary to the implication, the chief is not a liar. Go ahead, Chief.
Well, I'll say it again, Mayor. I don't lie. I don't have a need to lie. Any statement that I give is based on information that I have at the time. We're completing an after-action report, a review, in order to get to an after-action report for May 30th as we speak. We should have that coming up in the next few weeks, and that report will be made public. And everything that we find out or know already that happened on May 30th will be contained in that report. And then as far as our scientific investigation unit response this weekend, I can get you an exact number. We didn't come prepared to talk about their response. This is more about talking about the violence, letting people know it's not acceptable and how we can curtail that violence.
And so in both of our response, I want you to understand that so that you don't print something that is out of context, that we're not saying that the sheriff is a liar either. The sheriff is not a liar. The facts will present themselves, and where the facts lead, they lead. Next.
You have one question remaining.
Hi, Mayor. It's Ed Galley from Fox 8.
Yeah.
Hello there. Just a quick hybrid question between the mask and the violence.
Okay.
And that is, with so much violence on the street, how do you really expect police to help enforce people not wearing masks?
Well, you know, this is always the dilemma of decision-making and leadership. We have to deal with multiple things at one time, whether they're a pandemic, whether there's social unrest, all of just the normal things that happen in the course of doing business that happens every day, just doing business. And particularly in the normal course of doing business, you have an uptick. So it is demanding. But we are responsible to do some things at this point in time that requires us to try to stymie this pandemic and to do the things necessary to do that. At the same time, respond to what we know is an unusual uptick, not only in Cleveland, but throughout the country in terms of violence, and then just do the normal things that you do every day. So we figure out a way to do it. You know, I can easily talk my way out of doing something by talking about the challenges involved and saying, well, you know, it makes no sense for us to do it because the challenges are this, so I'm not going to issue a no mask order. Well, that would be completely irresponsible to do that because I know we're in the middle of a pandemic. But at the same time, I know that just normal course of business, we're in an uptick of violence and the police are going to have extra demand on them. I know all of that. So again, as I said, we're working with health, we're working with public safety, and we're working with other people, the state, and particularly in terms of clubs and bars and liquor licenses, and people who frequent those places, whether or not they wear masks. Now, if you're talking about people just walking around in public, we'll get to a protocol that really will have a proper use of discretion when that comes about as to what police do or not do. And when the council passes some penalties as to whether they make that a civil penalty or do they make it a criminal penalty if somebody knows they're COVID-19 infected but they still want to walk around with a mask on. You know, those are the kind of things we'll look at. And then we'll work with the governor in terms of what his orders will be, particularly since we're in a red county. But you asked the right question. It's challenging. But you know what? We're going to do it.
Got it.
If I can just
You have 0 questions remaining.
touch on that briefly, is that public safety as a whole, police, fire, and EMS deal with a myriad of calls daily. They don't focus on one simple thing. They have calls that come in and prioritize it based on the need and on the emergency. The thing about masks and about COVID-19 is that this is not something that public safety can solve. It's a partnership, of course, with public safety and the health department and our state partners, as the mayor has said, but it's also incumbent on the citizens of Cleveland to recognize the seriousness of COVID-19. It's up to the citizens of Cleveland and the businesses of Cleveland to recognize the seriousness of COVID-19 and everyone doing their part to flatten the curve, to reduce the amount of cases. Police and fire were out July 4th weekend, Saturday night, on West 6th Street and in the Flats, speaking with business owners, urging them and talking with them about their patrons being provided masks and wearing masks. We are being proactive with educating the public on the importance of wearing masks and protecting them, individuals protecting themselves and protecting others. The answer to addressing COVID-19 is very much so on the individual. We will get into an enforcement arm of addressing those that do not want to take it seriously, that do not want to protect the safety of themselves and others. But it is in large part incumbent on the individual and the businesses to wear a mask and take precautions to protect themselves from COVID-19 and to help flatten the curve.
And thank you for that, Director. And the more people do that, then the less of a challenge it will be on us. Any other questions? Try one more time. Let's see if they got a question.
You have 0 questions remaining.
Well, I thank you for being part of the conference, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.